Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today we're talking about Once Upon a Time in China, a 1991 Hong Kong film. And this movie revolves around celebrated folk hero Wong Fei Hung, who, like Sherlock Holmes in the West, has had many, many movies made about him, starring many different actors and involving many different adventures. I mean, I don't know how many Sherlock Holmes movies there have been. It's a lot. Similarly, there are a lot of Wong Fei Hung films. And in fact, this film itself is the first of a franchise. You can probably tell that from the fact that the image above says trilogy in it. But the series actually continued well beyond just 3 films. By the end of the 90s, there had been 6 of them, plus a TV show. Jet Li played the title role in the first 3 films, as well as the last one, with Vincent Zhao filling his shoes for the other entries. But yeah, so big franchise, ran for a number of years. I think 1997 was the last film where they had Once Upon a Time in China and America. But this was the first of the series, and it has Master Wong dealing with arrogant Westerners, local bandits, and government officials who are more interested in keeping the powerful foreigners happy than in doing what is right, because this is from a period where Western nations had a very active and somewhat adversarial relationship with China, where they were basically had forced China to accept unfair trading arrangements and the like. I mean, the British fought wars in order to be allowed to continue to sell opium and basically create a drug trade, for instance. So in this film, it's the Americans that are the black-hearted villains, which is interesting to see. You don't often see that, obviously, in Western cinema. You don't often see, like the Americans as the bad guys. Now, obviously, this film does have, bad guy Chinese as well, but it's very much the Americans who are the ones in charge of the wicked machinations. The British do appear in the film. They're the only other foreigners depicted, and they're basically shown as pompous and ineffectual, but not actually malevolent, which, this film was made in the final decade of British rule in Hong Kong, and they were perhaps being kinder to the British because of that. Who knows? But yeah, this is a movie where, Western characters are, the bad guys, and Master Wong has to stop them and their Chinese associates. So, what does this film involve? What are the things I want to talk about? Well, number one, obviously, this is a wire fu classic, basically. So, wire fu, probably in terms of the Anglosphere cinema consciousness, probably really became a thing in the late 90s and early 2000s when movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon got big releases. But that was probably to some extent off the back of the success of The Matrix, which was a Western English language movie that drew heavily on wire fu techniques. But wire fu has a much longer history in Chinese cinema. It's been around for a much longer time, and this film is widely regarded as a classic example of the form. And it's easy to see why. It has numerous cleverly staged stunt and fight sequences involving the technique. As you might expect, the climactic battle towards the end of the film between Jet Li, his character, and his principal Chinese adversary is a particularly epic, elaborate, imaginative fight scene with exquisite choreography. Now, I should mention that not everyone is necessarily going to be a fan of wire fu. Some people prefer films with a much more grounded, realistic martial arts style. And hey, that's a perfectly reasonable preference to have. I like both myself. And Once Upon a Time in China is not going to... If you don't like wire fu, Once Upon a Time in China is not going to change your mind. But if you do enjoy it, it does it very well indeed. So that is basically, if you like wire fu, this is a good wire fu movie. But it's not a movie that is completely absent of flaws. And so, for all of its wire fu wizardry, which I enjoyed very much, it has some issues. So, it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long, which I felt was a little bit too long. It definitely took a while to get going. And one element that I could have happily seen excised from the film, just in general, but also to reduce the runtime, were the fact that there were multiple diversions into slapstick humour sequences along the way. And they felt, for what was generally a fairly serious in tone film in a lot of ways, odd and out of place, and they pulled me out of the movie and detracted from my enjoyment of it. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I feel I should mention that I am by no means an expert on the cinematic conventions of Cantonese cinema, and so what felt off and out of place to me might be perfectly normal and expected to a Cantonese-speaking audience, in the same way that Hindi and Telugu films have big song and dance routines, and that it, out of nowhere, and that is perfectly normal and expected within those cinema conventions. So it could be cultural context that I'm missing, but I expect that most of the not very large number of people who watch this video will also be from an English-speaking audience and will have broadly cinematic expectations to me. So it's a reaction that you may also have. On the other hand, maybe you love slapstick humour and you'll think it's great. Who knows? But yeah, for me, didn't quite hit the right note. And the other thing I did want to call out, because I think it would be remiss of me not to mention it, is a bit of a content warning. There is an extended attempted rape sequence late in the film, which I felt was lingered on to a rather uncomfortable extent. Now, the movie is 30 years old, and such kind of problematic content was more common in general in cinema back then. Not that cinema today is always better. I recently saw The Wolf on Wall Street, which uncritically glamorizes the highly misogynistic attitudes of its main character. Like, it leaves the misogyny of the character completely unexamined and just basically presents this glamorous lifestyle of, banging all the ladies. So yeah, we're not entirely better yet. But, regardless whether the film is 30 years old or recent, this sequence may be uncomfortable for people to watch. I certainly found it unpleasant and something of a black mark on the film. So just be advised, if you do sit down to watch it, there is that sequence late in the film. So next time, a bit of a change of pace. We're going to talk about Atlas from 1961, where Roger Corman chases that sweet, sweet Hercules money, because this is a couple of years after Steve Reeves made a couple of monster hits about Hercules. So we'll be talking about what Corman does with this movie, and why it's interesting. So hopefully you'll come by and check that out. In the meantime, thanks for watching this one, and I hope you enjoyed it.